Welcome to Find Your Next Six-Figure Infill Deal for Friday, April 24th, 2026. Today we have another Cottage Village that we're going to cover. It's actually probably the third or fourth one we've covered in the last month and a half. We have one pretty well underway doing entitlements, and then I have this one this week, and there's another one active on the market as well. That was a deal that we couple of weeks ago. And I'm going to do something a little bit different today as well. I'm actually going to go over just some knowledge at the beginning. We'll do a little bit of training at the very beginning of these calls each week, and then we'll jump into the rest of the call schedule. So the first thing I wanted to cover today is the three biggest mistakes people new to infill development make. And so one thing I've kind of noticed over the last, few weeks or few months is that there are some infill deals that are on the market, that they're either entitled but not improved, or they're pretty much that's what it is. They're entitled, but they don't have the infrastructure in. There is occasionally some properties that have the infrastructure in that they're selling the whole development deal. But primarily, I'm going to focus on the deals that people buy and then they get them entitled and then they put them on the market. And so, and this, these mistakes kind of, can happen at any step of the way, but I just want to point them out. Just so whether you buy a deal from me or are listening to this for the first time and you're in a different market or on our market and you already have bought deals or you're looking at buying deals. I think this is some key big things to know. So number one is people don't start with the end in mind and work backwards. So basically, instead of focusing on profitability, they're only focused on just design or the purpose and then getting it to the next stage. So there's a couple of things that this looks like. And, a lot of times people think that they have the end in mind, but they don't necessarily work backwards. And so they just say, okay, I want to, build this beautiful project, but they're not taking the steps backwards as far as, okay, what's it going to be worth at the end? And then how much is it going to cost to get there? What am I paying for it? And what's my margin? Or they're not doing that correctly. And a lot of times what happens is, they're going to go out and hire the professionals, and those professionals are going to just get paid to do what they're instructed. And most of those professionals are not going to necessarily have the cost in mind, and the profitability in mind, because that's not their job. So your job as the investor is to have that profitability piece in mind, and your job is to design the project to be the most profitable as possible, whether it's for you or for the next user. So what ends up happening is, let's say you hire an architect, and nothing against architects, we use them all the time, but let's say you hire an architect and you say, okay, build me, design this beautiful project. Well, that architect is very good at their job and they're going to design a very good, very beautiful product. The problem is sometimes is maybe they build it or they design it with a 2,000 square foot home or townhome or whatever it is. But maybe the market is telling you that you can build an 1,800 square foot home, and that's where the market is. And that 2,000 square foot home is not going to sell as well, or you're going to have to take discounts. It all comes down to the neighborhood as well. So really, analyzing the neighborhood, which we'll get into here in a second, but ultimately just not having a really good focus or honed in on what that end result is, and then working step by step backwards. And then number two is they don't know what the cost of things are. So this kind of goes back to what I was saying, where you might have an architect design something, but they're going to design it to be really beautiful, and they might not be designing it towards being the most cost effective or the most effective use of the space. And so when you go to sell it at the next phase, um, you might try to be selling it for too much. Like there's a good example right now. There's I think a 13 unit townhome complex that's entitled. It's not improved, but it's overpriced by probably double. They're asking about $2 million for it, and it's probably only worth half that. And so it's really just, I don't know what their cost is on it. but they probably overpaid for the lot. They probably overpaid for the design. They didn't maximize the use. And so now they have it on the market for a lot more than what it should be. And they might end up losing money if they end up selling it. Or they're just holding on, hoping they hit a home run, and they might only be a single. And then the third one is just that they don't have a clear exit strategy with backups, and or they don't understand their exit market. So this goes back to the first point, which is, understanding that you have to start with the end in mind. So that comes down to the neighborhood, but also your end buyers. So if you're just buying something to entitle it and putting it on the market, you have to understand who your buyers are going to be at that stage. So your buyers at that stage, when the project's just entitled, are going to be other developers or other builders. And you have to understand that that's not an end user that's going to live in the product. And so those builders still need to have a profit margin on that. So you have to understand the cost to develop, and then also the cost to build, but then also the cost of money and the margin that the builders are expecting on those. And then you can work backwards from there. So, and then, same thing if you're doing a project with the intent to go all the way through to vertical, you just have to know what your market is at the end. And so those are the three biggest mistakes. And then we've kind of designed our system to essentially eliminate those mistakes because we have the experience, and we'll get into that here in a little bit. But I'm going to introduce myself. My name is Zach Matson. I'm a developer here in Boise. I've started in real estate back in 2013 by doing a house hack, buying a duplex, living on one side and fixing up the other. I did that again a little less than 2 years later. And then about 6 months after that, I started flipping full time and got into development full time in 2020, and transitioned full time into infill development. And then, so in 2023, so I did had a few projects under my belt from 2020 to 2022. 2023, I realized I really wanted to scale up, or towards the end of 2023. And so 2024, really focused on scaling. And then come last year, I realized that there's just so much opportunity on the market. I can't possibly buy all the projects myself. So I started thinking about how I could essentially use my skills and team to do more deals, but also kind of a win-win where we can help individual investors take advantage of the opportunities, but also bring in revenue for my company. And so that's how this system kind of was born. So a little bit about our infill deal list and how to get access to it. So we have where we give full access to our infill deal list to both realtors and investor clients. So if you are a realtor, we actually have a really cool realtor program. We just have you watch or attend in person. We'll probably have another one of those coming up here in a few months. But our parts 1 and 2 on infill development and our construction process, those are also right now on video that we'll send you the link if you want to be part of our network. And then we also have our part 3, which just goes over our infill deal list and how to understand it. I'll also probably be re-recording that here soon because we've actually kind of upgraded it since we launched it, or first started it about a year ago. And then we just have you sign an agreement stating that if you're going to use our strategies that we're suggesting with your buyer clients, that you'll introduce us to your buyers early on. That essentially just helps, obviously one, rapport helps, but the biggest thing is just once you guys have a project or a property under contract, we want to make sure that we're involved in the process from day one, because that helps us do our job, and it follows through into how we guarantee everything. And then a bonus for realtors, we have free marketing campaigns that you can co-brand with us. We send out our weekly deal sheet that you can co-brand and send out to your network. We also have additional marketing materials that are available as well. And then if you're an investor, you can also have access to the list full time. If you're already working with a realtor, you can bring that realtor on. They just have to go through that same process I just described. If you don't have one that you're working with yet, we can refer you to one of our realtor partners that have already been through the training and that we've been working with. And then we also have you go through the training. So we have it tailored for investors and tailored for realtors. So we just have you watch those training series. And then we also have you sign in an agreement just saying that if you're going to use our strategies on the identified properties, that you'll use our services. And then getting to how we get paid and why I'm doing this in the first place is I kind of mentioned it earlier where, we basically created a system in order for us to be able to bring in revenue and help investors. So the way we make money is on our GC fees on the horizontal and vertical build. And then we also do entitlements. So we're fully vertically integrated. We go all the way through the build and we start from day one where we help you identify the property, and then go through all the entitlements and due diligence. So we charge an entitlements fee, and that's just an hourly rate at the management services to manage all the agencies and the professionals. So we still hire out the architects or the engineers, all that fun stuff. And then we also charge you a consulting fee, and that's paid at purchase, or if it's a extended close, we have you pay at the end of due diligence, and that essentially just covers our cost of doing all this and going through the due diligence. We put in, dozens of hours into each deal on the due diligence. We have a 200-point checklist that we go through, so that just helps recoup our costs on the front end there. So the details of our offer here and why we set this up and how it works. So number one is, when I was kind of coming up with this system, I realized that most investors don't know anything about development or building, or very little anyway, and there's really not a whole lot of information out there. There's development is kind of a high bar to get into. A lot of it is, basically myself, it was all self-taught. I just kind of, I guess, had the guts to pull the trigger on a few deals, and it allowed me to get into it. And then I learned, but there's not a whole lot of information out there otherwise. And it's somewhat nuanced as well. So we basically set this up so that, or because we understand that investors don't want to lose money on a bad deal, or they are worried about not knowing the process and making a mistake, worried about projects taking too long or contractors cutting corners. And then another big one is just not having control or visibility into all the processes and timelines. So some of the core components of this is we have expert deal underwriting. So we vet, analyze, and underwrite every deal on our list. We offer and negotiation support. So we work with you and your realtor on how to structure deals to get them under contract. That's a win-win for everybody. So obviously we want you to get the deal, but we also want to make sure that we have enough time to get through the due diligence that we need to get through. And then we do a step-by-step due diligence. So I mentioned earlier, we have that 200-point due diligence checklist. We do about 95% of that. The other 5% is you and your realtor. And then a lot of these deals have an existing house on the property. Not all of them, some of them are bare land, but if there's an existing house on the property, we can also do the renovation of that if it's necessary. I'd say there's probably around half, maybe a little less than half, that needs some kind of renovation. And then we do the entitlement management. So we manage that whole process to get the project approved and the civil engineering plans approved. And then of course we general contract the horizontal and vertical. So some of the bonuses we give you, so we give you our ultimate guide introduction to infill development. If you're on our email list, you should have gotten that emailed already. And then we also provide you with our due diligence checklist. So once you're under contract, we give you that checklist and you can follow along as we go through it. And then at the end of due diligence, or at the right before the end of due diligence, we give you our final one-page underwriting worksheet, and that acts as the final go or no-go on your investment decision. And then we compare our results at the very end to that one-page sheet, and that's what we base our profit guarantee on as well. And then during entitlements, we're going to provide you with our entitlements process checklist and projected timeline, so you can kind of follow along with what the projections are of when things get approved. And then we're also on the construction side of things, we're also going to give you that construction process and inspection checklist. And then as another thing that we do that most builders don't is that we do a third-party new home inspection report at 4 key phases. So we inspect the projects ourselves, but we also hire a third party to come in and basically inspect what we expect. And we inspect it at all the rough ends, so you see what's behind the walls and if any mistakes were made and how they got fixed. Then we inspect it at drywall, at interior and exterior finishes, and then the final inspection. The seventh thing is we do a monthly progress call. We actually have one coming up right after this call where we're going to we review the progress that we made from the previous month on all of our active projects. And so that's kind of it's great, number one for education if you're thinking about investing in a deal and just want to get a feel for, what the process is like. You get a little bit more detail on what that actual process looks like of entitlements and also construction. And then it also, if you own a deal already, it just keeps you up to date. So instead of me, texting everybody on every little update, I'll just, I post these videos once a month and we go over all the key details. And then if you have additional questions or need additional follow-up, we can do that as well. And then this is where we get into our guarantees next. So we do our entitlements guarantees. So like on a deal this one this week where we have a 10-unit cottage village. Once we get through that due diligence period, if it remains 10, which this one I'm confident on, but other deals it might only be 9 or it might be 11. Once we get through that due diligence period, we're very confident. And so we back that up with our guarantee. So if it gets to the end and we say you're going to be able to do 10 units, we back that up with our entitlements guarantee. If we fall one short, what we do is we take our fee that we charge you for that, our consulting fee, and we credit that towards the horizontal development. Or if you're moving on to a different projects, we apply that towards the next project. And then we have our final guarantee, which is our underwriting guarantee or our profit guarantee. And this is where we guarantee that if the project doesn't meet at least 100% of the profit that we project at the final due diligence or on that final one-page underwriting worksheet, we're going to refund you up until it does. And that's up to 50,000 for one or two lot split. It's 20,000 per unit after that, up to 10. So it's up to a total of 200,000, for example, on this deal. And so if the final projected profit is 350,000, when we get all the way to the end and you only make 300,000, we're going to kick in that extra 50,000. So you get up to the 350,000. And then same thing, if we fall short by that 200,000, that gets kicked in. So we just give you that additional buffers where we give you that peace of mind where you can reasonably expect to make that. Then of course, if the world ends, there's no such thing as a no risk deal, but we significantly de-risk it for you. Then of course you also benefit from 100% of the upside if it does better than what we expect. And that's kind of our goal going into every single one of these deals is that we under promise and over deliver. So our goal is to say you're going to make X amount and you end up making X amount plus 10 or 20% is ultimately our goal. Okay. I'm going to jump into the deal of the week. Does anybody have any that's watching on here? Does anybody have any questions with what I covered there? I'm going to share my screen on this deal of the week here. Okay, so this is the underwriting on to this week's deal of the week, which is another cottage development. When I first looked at this, I looked at this as it's kind of a unique opportunity because you could actually subdivide this as well and build new homes. And I thought that might work. Unfortunately, this area of town, new construction just isn't doing really well. So, by the time you subdivide it and put in the infrastructure that's required and then build it, and then the sales costs, you end up not doing super well on the new construction homes. And I kind of knew that, just from this part of town. I think within the next year, I think that's going to turn around, but there's just some comparables that basically sat on the market for a long time and then they ended up taking huge price reductions like in the figure of like six figures. So that's what the comparables that we're looking at right now, but I think with the market the way it's going, I think that'll turn around. But what is still really solid is these cottage developments because essentially you can build more, the infrastructure is less, and they cost less to build, and because they're smaller also, you have a higher dollar per square foot when you go to resell. So these still end up working out pretty well, and we usually go in pretty conservative on these resale prices too. There's not a lot of these types of deals on the market. There's some similar comparables, but it's just not a common thing. The city of Boise codified it at the end of 2023, but there, as far as I know, there hasn't been a single. Well, I take that back. There's been a couple of cottage developments built to the new code, but I think they've been townhome developments, so those are decent comparables. But detached homes will sell more for than townhomes. So the numbers on this, so we have a projected profit right now at 357 with a total capital invested at 367. The purchase price is 815. Now, what I want to cover on this one is a lot of times on a lot of our deals is the house is basically worth that price. Well, on this deal, I think the house on its own, if you don't factor in that the rest of the land, it's probably only worth 575, and so you're actually paying a premium on the land. Now, we don't like this on most of the deals. Most of the time we want this as close to zero as possible, but that's still not bad for a premium on the land unentitled. However, I'd be surprised if it sells for this price. So if somebody's interested in this deal, I think the way to go would be to go in and see about negotiating a lower price or some kind of additional terms, like seller carry terms or something. But anyway, this capital invested is assuming 25% down on the price of the home, but also doing like 50% down on the difference between the land value and the house value. So basically kicking in additional capital because the house isn't worth that much on the tail end. Now, what I will say is sometimes you can, like, as long as it appraises, you might still be able to get it financed for 25% down of the 815. But where that extra 50% down is going to come in a lot of times is when you go to split off that original house and sell it. That original lender, obviously there's going to be money still that is going to be owed to the lender. So that's where that extra capital comes in if you can finance it on the front end. Okay, and then we have, let me just, before we talk numbers, let me go to the site plan here so it's a little bit clearer to understand what we're looking at. Okay, so this is the property. It's on just shy of an acre. I think it's 0.895. There's an existing house right here at this is a street and this is a street, so it's on a corner lot. Even with cottage development, so even though it's not a subdivision, you still have to do infrastructure improvements. So all my costs are factoring in having to widen the road here. This one's already fully improved. There's actually some new housing that was built just a few years ago right behind it over here. But then so widening this road, putting in sidewalk, and then behind this from this street doing an access, like basically an access to the parking back here. And then we can do 10 cottages, and that meets all the density requirements. And the reason why cottages like this are great is because number one is you don't have to do a traditional subdivision. So you don't have to put in all the infrastructure and then go get the plat signed and then you can build. So you basically cut off 6 months of development time and waiting time. You also cut off time on the front end because the project gets approved through an administrative split, but not even a split, an administrative process. So it doesn't have to go to city council. And so you basically cut off like 3 months of approval time, and then the civil engineering is also a lot easier. So a lot of times you can get that also approved in 3 months quicker. So approvals to basically break ground is typically 6 to 9 months versus 12 months plus a lot of times on the subdivisions. And then on the development side, you can actually put in all the horizontal infrastructure and build. Theoretically, you could build at the same time. A lot of times logistically that doesn't necessarily work. On this deal it might, just because you would be putting in the infrastructure here and then the individual houses you could do over here. And you could, depending on what the sewer looks like, maybe the sewer has a main coming up here and then individual lines coming down the central part. And if that's the case, you could really be constructing these at the same time you're doing all this stuff. So there's some possibility there to shorten your time frame even more. But typically what we expect is that we put in the horizontal infrastructure, and then basically immediately after go towards the vertical, instead of waiting that 6 months to get the plat approved. And then once these are partially framed or framed, you can get the condo split going, the condo plat going. So you condominiumize these, and that's what allows you to sell them individually. And so how that structure works is that the end buyer buys the house, they own the house, they don't own the land necessarily, they have an ownership share in the entire property. So it's all still one parcel, but they are basically co-owners with everybody else of the whole parcel. But you can also, like on this deal, it's actually kind of unique where we can actually still set out individual private areas, they call them. So essentially you can still have private backyards for all these, and that's set aside in the CCNRs and on the condo plat saying these are private areas, these are common areas. It's just that they don't own that specific lot or land piece of land that their specific unit is sitting on. They own their unit and then a share of the overall land. Okay, jumping back into the numbers here again.
Do you
So we
factor
have,
in
oh, go ahead.
do you factor in a lower resale price for the condo aspect? And or maybe tougher to sell on the back end?
Sorry, I had my volume way down. Could you repeat your question?
Oh, do you factor in a lower price on the resale for those because they're condos?
Yeah, I usually am pretty conservative on that. These resale prices are actually they're actually, yeah, so let me just show you what so I have this valued at 370 at the end. In this really nearby is it's a NeighborWorks project, which is like the low income housing, and they're selling townhomes that are this size. So they're attached walls, and they're on a land lease. So it's a little bit different where they actually like they don't even own it. They just lease the land and then they own the building. But those townhomes are selling for 370 new construction. So I think um this is pretty conservative. I think these are more realistically probably going to sell close to 400 or possibly even a little bit more. But I would say this is pretty solid here, just based on similar projects, but going in conservatively to allow for, um, you know, not exactly having the best comparables. And then on the resale, like sitting longer, what we would do before we start construction is do an analysis on what we think the absorption rate is going to be and not overbuild. So what we want to do is build at most what we think is going to be 3 months of inventory. But ideally, what we do too is we actually get some of these pre-sold. So ideally, we can go in and take deposits, even if they're only $5,000 deposits, but at least we have people committed to buying the projects or the finished units. And if we can get half of them pre-sold before we ever break ground, essentially by having really good renderings and floor plans, that's half the battle is getting those pre-sold, and then you can build them and build the other ones as spec, and then you can be reasonably certain they're going to sell pretty quickly. But there's just not a lot. Anything sub 400,000, there's not a lot on the market. So, on this project, obviously you don't want to overbuild and overcompete with yourself, but there's also just very few projects or very few homes on the market sub 400,000 and almost non-existent for new construction, at least in city limits areas.
Right. Got it. And are your plans, is this the same plan 10 times?
We would probably change it up a little bit and maybe give, especially for pre-sales, we would also give some options in there. So, um, we would explore what that looks like, but I would probably say we do 2 or 3 different floor plans, but not super different. But we would also, you could have the potential too to do a two bedroom floor plan. I also have, I have another project that we're working on right now, actually, that or working through entitlements right now. That's a cottage village, but we have 3 bedroom, 2 bath floor plans that are 1,000 square feet. And so they could be 3 bedroom, 2 bath. We could also give the option for 2 bedroom, same size, just 2 bedrooms, maybe larger bedrooms, or maybe 2 bedroom, 2 bath, where they're each their own ensuite.
Got it. Thanks.
Yep. Okay, so then with all of our numbers, we factor in, all of the construction costs, and all of our costs, by the way, so like construction costs, the development costs, entitlement costs, that's all including what our fees and what our charges are in there. So these numbers, these profit projections are already factoring in what we get paid on all that. And then it also factors in all your sales costs on the tail end. The existing house we factor, so again, we think it'll resell for probably 575 if it's on its own. And then you have the sales cost there. So you end up losing money on the existing house. Obviously from 815, you lose a bunch of money, but that's essentially, we're saying that's the land value, and we're applying that towards the cost of the cottages. And ideally you get it closer to what the actual value is on the on the on the actual house value. And then this house is pretty turnkey, so you could actually rent it out. If you're going to resell it and you wanted to like maximize the profit, maybe you update it a little bit, but theoretically you could just, once it's ready to resell, you just put it back on the market. It is not ugly or anything by any means. It's at least been updated. Just not super modern, but still looks good. Okay, and then the only other thing I want to touch on is what we do on these as well is, so we on this very last column we do, if you just refinanced everything, so basically what the debt would be on the project, if you want to do that, like refinance everything and keep it as rentals, that's a number that you can plug in and figure out if that works as rental. Most of the time these don't work if you keep all of them to rent. Depending on the area of town, it might, but this I can almost guarantee it won't. So then we also underwrite it with, this is just an example, if you sold all but one, you'd essentially get all your capital back. So you would get all of your cash back. So after you sell the initial house, you get some of that money back there. This is that second influx of money once you sell all but one cottage, and you actually get all your capital back, plus you make 40,000, so you make 10% on your money. And then you also have a cottage free and clear at the very end. And this is what that cash flow looks like there. So your net cash flow looks like about 2,100. Sorry, your gross cash flow net after, if you have a property managed, is about 1,750. You could also rent it out as an Airbnb. We just analyze those as well. Some deals look better than others. This probably isn't a great Airbnb, but if you wanted to Airbnb it, a lot of times when we design them that way, they end up doing a lot better because they're, we kind of capitalize on that market. So, okay, so that's that one. We also have this similar deal on Maple Grove. This is our deal of the week just a few weeks ago. It still hasn't sold. I have multiple people telling me that they want to buy it, but nobody's pulled the trigger yet. And this is similar deal, similar part of town, maybe actually a little bit better location because it's a little bit closer to Garden City. And so we have the resale prices a little bit higher, not by much. And ultimately, again, that's probably pretty conservative. But the purchase price is a lot lower. So 550 instead of 815. And then all the other numbers are pretty similar. I think the horizontal costs are a little bit more because that goes a little bit deeper into the lot and it's not a corner lot. So the infrastructure costs are a little bit more. But similar overall looking project, but it's basically double the profit of what this one is. So if people want to get a little bit more details on that, I'm not going to go really in depth on this one because I've covered it a couple times, but that is if you rewatch my video from the 27th of March, We go in depth on this one as well. And then let's see, for subdivisions, if there's anything else I want to cover. If anybody's interested in higher end, more like semi-custom homes, we have this deal on Hill Road that's still on the market. The biggest thing I think with this one is just it's a huge home in that area, and the price is is higher than a lot of these other deals. It's probably still a little bit overpriced, but it's probably pretty close. They've come down in price by I think around 100,000 or so since it's been on the market, um but that's great too. Like these are we'd build 5 single family homes about 2,400 square feet, and these margins are really good on the resale. So you have about 130,000 profitability on each one of those. um you lose some money on the existing house, but that kind of makes up for those other five. Just takes a little bit more capital, but that could be a really cool project as well. Okay, getting into land deals. We have this one from last week still. Again, if somebody wants to kind of review a little bit more in depth than what I'm going to cover on this call, we did cover this pretty extensively last week on our call. This one has two different options, or actually three different options. So it's one basically half-acre parcel. It's right next to Push and Pour in Garden City. So about the best location you can get in the Treasure Valley, with it right next to the Whitewater Park area, Casino Beach. We can build this as 12 townhomes, and this is the profits if we built and sold 12 townhomes. The great thing with this is that this is pretty bread and butter. Like this is, we have really great comps because those Casino Beach townhomes were just completed and sold. So these comparables, like this is pretty spot on for the square footage and resale prices. In fact, some of those sold for over 900. So this is on the conservative end again. But this is just a really good comparables there. The downside to this is just the purchase price is higher for raw land, but it's just a fantastic location, so it's hard to go wrong. And then we also analyzed it as an apartment or condo project. So apartments and condos, essentially, you can build it they're built the exact same way. The only difference is that the condos, you do the condo plat. So there's a little bit more requirements on logistics and administratively there, but essentially it's the same project. Um, and then the reason why I like condos in today's market is multifamily just it's really hard to make multifamily pencil right now because of those long-term interest rates. Um, but on this deal, just because of the location, it actually does pencil as an apartment complex. So I forget if I had the numbers here, if I had it somewhere else, but it did cash flow. These numbers aren't accurate. I think I had a different underwriting I'm not going to search for, but it did cash flow with the cash that you had into it. Or you essentially sell it at a 5.5 cap and you make, I think it was 1.7 million. Oh, sorry, that's this deal here. 1.7 million as an apartment. Oh, this is where it is. The $10,000 cash flow a month as an apartment, but that's also not refinancing all your money out. So 10,000 a month cash flow, but that's with having 1.5 million into it. But you could essentially, if you wanted to just get your make a profit, you could sell it as a 5.5 cap and make 1.7 million. This is selling it. This profit is selling all the individual units. So it's basically still a 20 unit apartment complex, but selling the condos independently. What's unique about this is I think there's a huge market for that. And we're really conservative on those resales, but having condos basically that are selling for on average 428 in that location, I think would sell all day long. Basically, it was kind of an entry level price point for somebody that wants to be right next to the river there. And then with that, so you sell all those individually, and you can keep hold on to some of them. I have another project that I'm a partner on that, the whole intent is, when it didn't pencil as an apartment, We're going to build it as condos. And then what we can do is sell half of them, and then you finance half of them into long-term debt, and you're still cash flowing and still make money. So there's that possibility with condos as well, as you can sell as many as you want to kind of get your cash back out, or finance it at the right leverage. Um, but yeah, and then the other thing too with this project is we have four. So I planned this with 2,500 square feet of retail space on the first floor. So that'd be over four stores or four storefronts. That could be 2 units, it could be four. But that's kind of how I planned it out, is with two or four, sorry. And that is, so this number where you sell this, make 1.5 million on the sale of condos. Well, now you still own the commercial space free and clear. So you've gotten all your money back. You've made 1.5 million. And now you own that 2,500 square feet of commercial space with zero money out of pocket. And that's basically infinite cash flow for however long you own it. And then that, just based on comparables for rental space there, I think that'll bring in about 100,000 a year. So essentially you're creating 100,000 in income out of nowhere for yourself, and you can go and move on to the next deal. This is another condo project that we analyzed a couple months ago now. More off of State Street, west of downtown a little ways. I won't go into depth on that, but I have that up too. Out of these two, even though this is more profitable and lower price point, I guess if if you want to limit your cash, this is great. To me, this Garden City deal is a little bit less risky just because of the location, but okay. And then vacant land. Okay, so I wanted to talk about this deal briefly. Let me see if I have. Don't have the site plan pulled up on this, but this deal in Garden City, so this is on the market. We actually have a buyer lined up for this particular parcel, but there's a neighboring parcel. Let me just pull this up so I can explain. Might take a minute. So on this block, there are 4 properties total. And we already own one of them. The second one is on the market. I've been in talks with the owner of the third one. The fourth one, actually, like, it doesn't matter if we bought it or not, because it's not necessarily critical to getting the deal done. So this is the one, we have a client that already owns this parcel. We're going to develop this no matter what. But when this came on the market, we were like, man, maybe we could do something with all of these and making an even better project that's maximize the density more, and also just makes it a more cohesive project instead of like kind of piecemealing this together over time. And so this is the parcel that's for sale. It's this parcel and this one is together, same owner. And we have somebody ready to buy this. And we've already kind of been negotiating the price also with the seller, because they are high priced, but we have actually a price that we've kind of agreed on with an LOI. And then this is the other parcel. The tricky thing with this one is this guy is also a builder, but he thinks he has leverage by expecting like the maximum dollar amount. So basically more than it's worth. So that might be a little bit tricky. I've been kind of in talks with him, so we'll see. But if I can get him into like some kind of reasonable price scenario or terms scenario, I would I'll be presenting this deal to our network. But the cool thing with this parcel, so like if he developed this on his own, separate from all these, you can only get 4, maybe 5 units. Well, if we make this part of the rest of this, you can actually do 8 on this parcel, the way I have it laid out. In fact, let me see if I can quickly find the site plan and pull it up. almost. Stop my share and switch over to this other one. It's always one of those things when you need to pull something up quickly, it always your computer slows down on you. Anyway, while we're waiting on that, here we go. Share again. Okay, so this is the original plan for the parcel that we already own. So we're going to move forward with this either way. This is the site plan we came up with. If this, we did this one separately, and that one can be developed on its own. Well, then what I came up with, if we did all these together, is we could essentially, this street up isn't, that's existing there isn't up to standards. And so we could actually abandon that and then basically turn it into a private street and kind of make it into a roundabout way here. This meets all the parking and open space requirements. This is that other parcel that doesn't have to be developed now, but it could be. I actually looked up these guys' information. So if we get this guy on board, I'll reach out to these guys. But essentially this could become a 31 unit development versus this one would be 5, this one would be 8, and then this one would be 5 on its own, and then this one could only ever be maybe 1 or 2 if it's not developed with the rest of them. So I'm hoping this all comes together, trying to get this guy on board, but ultimately it kind of depends. I'm not gonna, put the whole project in a financial bind just to get that last deal. Because ultimately we underwrote this with just doing the one deal, so it doesn't matter if that guy wants to sell or not. If he's not willing to come to a reasonable price, we'll just move on, do this one and move on to the next one. But just wanted to bring that up because I will be hopefully presenting that soon, even if it's a little bit overpriced. Okay,
Remind me, what's the timeline on that one?
on the Xenia one I just showed,
Yeah,
those are essentially they're 3 years to get through everything. So it's a year to entitle, a year to put in the infrastructure and get the plat signed, and then another year to build and sell.
okay.
And we kind of started entitlements on the other one. We basically paused for a month to see if we could get this other stuff together, but we're going to start moving forward again on it here in a matter of days. So, okay. I think that's all I'm going to cover. Oh, you know what? I did want to bring up a couple of deals that came on the market this week because when I first saw these, I kind of got excited because I haven't seen like single lot splits for a few weeks. And so these ones came up. I was like, oh, there's some possibilities here. But unfortunately, the amount of infrastructure these need, and again, just kind of the area of town that they're in and what the resale prices go for, just due to new construction prices. Basically, we on a lot of these are just unfortunate um comparables that sold, I think, probably lower than they should have sold for, but that's what we have to go on. So 3 of these didn't really make sense. This one on Linden Street actually could make sense. The problem is that you lose a good chunk of money on the existing house because like for a 2-bedroom house, this is just, it's kind of a high price. It's a great location. The lot is fantastic. It's a nice house. I just don't think it's going to resell for 590. But even if it did, um, if this does go for 590 again, that's best case scenario, then it turns out a little bit better and it's closer to that 6 figures, but this still takes 3 years to get done. And so for similar capital, you can get just way better return in shorter time frames. So, if somebody's working with that between $200,000 and $300,000, there's I mean, right now we have that other deal that that looks better. So, but I'm going to keep an eye on this one. I'd be surprised if it sells right away. Well, not necessarily. I mean, it is a great location. It's a great lot. It's gorgeous. But it's got a great spot where we can split off 40 to 45 foot wide lot. We actually used to have a client that was looking, I think they might have found something like new construction, but they were looking at just for one of these split opportunities where they could find a great location, buy the house, split the lot, and then build like their dream home basically on the new lot. So this is a good situation for those type of clients where they have, maybe they're not necessarily looking at it as at the best ROI. They're just wanting to build their like a great home in a great location and have equity walking into it. So that's the situation where this would probably be ideal for. And that, yeah, just a fantastic location there. Okay, I think I think that was all I wanted to cover this week. I think I pretty much covered anything new on the market, but yeah, that's this Linden property that came up. So nice little house. It's actually a pretty big house for only 2 bedrooms, 1,600 square feet. So there might even be some value add there. I haven't looked at the floor plan or anything. I don't look inside these houses or do a whole lot of research on them until somebody is under contract or about to get under contract on them. So I just do kind of my high level numbers, and then if somebody is interested or has it under contract, that's where we really start digging in deep.
Does this one make sense at all to just do a quick lot split on and not build? Or is there any benefit in it if you
Yeah.
just,
Yeah, I mean, well, it's still a 2-year project on a lot split because essentially anymore you have to do. There's no such thing as a minor land division. Well, there is, but it doesn't make sense typically. So you still have to have to get it entitled, and then you have to put in the infrastructure, which is the sidewalks, putting the sewer line on, upgrading the power typically. But bare minimum, it's the sidewalks. I think this one is yeah, sidewalks on the front edge, and then probably putting the sewer line in as well. So not a huge expense. It just takes a little bit of time. But yeah, you could basically have it a project approval, probably actually because it's not like you'd probably have an approval in 6 months. The civil plans are going to be nothing. So that probably is 2 or 3 months. So theoretically, you could probably market it in a year. It might take, a year and 6 months max to finalize the plat, but yeah, it could be that you make 50 grand on the lot. And this is actually pretty conservative too. I think for the right end buyer, this is basically a builder price, but if the right end buyer might pay for that location maybe 200 or more. So that's always a possibility too, that you end up making more than this. I just analyze these as what I would pay as a builder in those locations. All right. I'm going to stop the recording here, and then if anybody that's watching this online later has any questions, you can always reach out to me directly. And then yeah, once I'm